but starting to go back down a little bit now, which is good. But yeah, we have to, for us, if we want to go into any restaurant or bar, we all have these QR codes that have our vaccinations on them, right? So they have to scan them in order for us to go into the building and be there, which is, me personally, I think that's great. But
yeah. You get used to anything. You're still wearing masks? Are you wearing masks?
Yeah, masks everywhere. Yeah, still wearing masks everywhere. But I found that when I was in the States, it wasn't as strict there as it is in Canada. But their numbers are proportionally less than they are in Canada too. So.
Yeah.
You there, Donna? I just see you logged in. Can you hear me now, Donna?
I surely can.
Oh, sweet. I have my comrade.
Hi there. How are you?
Hi. Good.
Hi, Daniel. Welcome.
Hello,
again.
how are you? Yes,
awesome.
thank you.
Great to have you.
Yeah, well, thanks for inviting me. I was very excited about this.
Well, we've got another one coming too, but we'll chat about that another day.
All right.
So, Carla, I'm introducing you at your point at 10:35. Is that correct?
Yeah, yes, please.
Okay, I can do that.
The good thing is my desktop has Canberra time still, so it's good. I can go off there with the timing.
Excellent. We're all over the shop at the moment. Daniel's in, is it Alberta, Canada, Daniel?
Yeah, I'm in Western Canada, close to the Rocky Mountains. So I'm still yesterday for you guys. I'm still in Tuesday.
Oh, wow. Awesome.
I was going to say, is everyone logged in now?
No, they'll start coming in and they'll show on your screen where you can see me. They'll be.
I can't see you. I can only see myself at the moment.
Oh, okay. So they've put us into pockets. That's okay.
Sorry, since you are the MC, Carla, I have spotlighted you because you'll start this session.
Yeah, that's okay. Yep.
Yep. Thank you.
Good morning, Annika.
Good morning. Carla, we can begin.
Can we begin? Okay, cool. Alrighty. Everyone ready?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. All right. Good morning. My name is Carla Duncan. I'm a current serving member of the Australian Federal Police. We begin today's proceedings by acknowledging the traditional and original owners of this land, and I pay my respects to the elders, past, present, and emerging. I also extend the same respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander peoples here with us today. On behalf of Mental Health Foundation Australia and the chairperson, Mr. Vasan Srivasan, I would like to welcome and thank each and every one of you for attending our police personnel's mental health forum on the 20th day of National Mental Health Month in 2021. Mental Health Month is an initiative of the Mental Health Australia, MHFA, to advocate for and raise awareness for Australian mental health as a community. The MHFA's National Mental Health Month is unlike any other mental health awareness campaigns. It aims to bring all Australians together in a nationwide conversation about mental health, and we aim to maintain this conversation for an entire month and beyond through a series of various mental health related events. National Mental Health Month is a program that the MHFA is extremely proud of, and we intend to reach out and educate as many Australians as possible to help reduce stigma and facilitate positive and non-judgmental discussion surrounding the important topic of mental health in Australia. With 1 in 5 Australians experiencing mental health illness, it is time we give mental health its due attention. And that is exactly what the MHFA is wanting to achieve. Throughout this month, many events have been organised in each state and territory of Australia, aiming to attract and unite Australians of all ages and backgrounds to raise awareness for the need of better mental health for all. This year, the theme of National Mental Health Month is post-pandemic recovery challenges and resiliences. This year's theme will focus on raising awareness about mental health in various industries and communities. Every individual has faced, and many are still facing, unprecedented challenges due to the COVID-19 pandemic. With this theme in mind, we aim to extend our campaign even wider than previous years, with events planned to embrace many different community groups and people of all ages walking on the road to recovery and fostering resilience. #Resilience and Recovery. Please join us in celebrating the Mental Health Foundation Australia by viewing a short video.
Hi everyone, I'm Vasan Srinivasan, Chairperson of the Mental Health Foundation Australia. It's a privilege to lead this wonderful community-based mental health organisation in its 91st year of establishment. The MHFA has grown strength to strength over the past few years. With Victorian Mental Health Month in 2018, the National Mental Health Month occurring in 2019, 2020 and this year in 2021. Last year, COVID-19 did not stop us from achieving our National Mental Health Month campaign. I'm proud to say we successfully shifted many events to a virtual platform, very much being able to pursue our objectives of raising awareness and advocating for better Australian mental health. Our primary aim is to reach out to and educate as many Australians as possible, to help reduce stigma and to encourage constructive and non-judgmental dialogue on Australia's critical mental health issue. A highlight of last year's campaign was reaching out to 100,000 Australians all across the country for our National Walks for Mental Health, both virtually through our MHFA app and physically in some states. What a grand success that was. In 2021, with pandemic still affecting many of us, we decided not to give up once again, curating a carefully chosen blend of virtual and physical events for Australians to participate in. This year, we have a new and improved MHFA app, giving people the opportunity to participate in National Mental Health Month from the palms of their hands. This year, theme is mental health and post-pandemic recovery challenges and resilience. Mental Health Foundation Australia is proud to partner with Australian technology business DB Results and take up the well-being app Am I OK? to support our members, enabling individuals to regularly check in on a private and secure platform and ask the question, Am I OK? Am I OK also alerts the user when it's time to seek outside help. We thank DB Results for this opportunity to promote well-being and early intervention. This year, we have launched a special initiative, the Mental Health Appeal on the 10th of October, our World Mental Health Day. Through this, we aim to raise funds for the development of a course promoting life and safety in young people. At the MHFA, we pride ourselves in making sure all our programs are for the community and powered by the community. We have a vast growing network of multicultural ambassadors, youth ambassadors, and future leaders who further the community voice in promoting mental health and well-being. Our multicultural network has inspired our educational and multicultural webinars as an initiative to assist individuals cope with success during the pandemic. I would like to take this moment to thank our board directors and patrons, scientific advisory committee members, our wonderful staff, multicultural and youth ambassadors, future leaders, MHFA members and major sponsors for their continued support to our organization as we continue to work to deepen understanding of the importance of mental well-being and educating the community. Let's work in solidarity for the benefit of our mental health. Thank you, Australia.
I would now like to invite Ashok Mysore. Ashok has over 29 years of industry experience across telecommunications, financial services, logistics, energy, utilities, and service industries. Ashok is Vice President and Regional Head of Delivery and Operations for Australia and New Zealand for Infosys. Ashok is also a Scientific Advisory Committee member of the MHFA. Infosys is a corporate partner of the MHFA, and we were supposed to have this event at their venue this year. Please join me in welcoming Ashok.
Thanks so much, Carla. Look, I would like to congratulate Mental Health Foundation Australia on its glorious 90+ years journey and amazing work being done under Chair Vasan Srinivasan, Co-Chair Jim Goodin, and MHFA board. It is my pleasure and privilege to take part in this important journey of raising awareness and trigger a nationwide conversation on reaching out and educating society on the stigma and the non-judgmental discussions about mental health. We all know that health and well-being of any workforce is paramount to the success of the organization. And on today's topic, where the high risk and high pressure environments for an unprepared mind is a well-recognized risk factor for mental health problems, depression and anxiety have a significant economic impact of it. The estimated cost of global economy is about $1 trillion per year in lost productivity. And when we look at Australia, despite $18 to $20 billion of investments to deal with mental health well-being, the fact is that the economic impact due to mental ill health is about $51 billion on an annual basis. Police officers experience a range of challenging situations, and although working within the police force is rewarding, the interaction between personal life stressors and the demands of working with policing can result in the development of mental health struggles. And unrecognized health issues can affect decision-making and capacity to cope in high-pressure situations. I believe, majority of the workplaces have an awareness. They have policies and tools to deal with mental ill health. And they're also aware that more actions that workplaces implement, the less common it is for people to attribute their mental ill health to their work. However, merely providing knowledge and access to tools and resources is not sufficient to create a behavioral change in the workplace mental health. The right level of intervention at the right time, support employees to restore their health and to remain at work. Further recognition that health interventions at key career transition points, especially in a workforce like the police personnel, such as post-deployment or retirement, can actually prevent illness and injury. So transition into and out of high-risk roles, can be a period of significant change, including social networks, family roles, physical health, and enhanced transition arrangements will help support the health of the individual at the time of transition into the future. Workplaces that promote mental health and support people with mental disorders are more likely to reduce absenteeism, increase productivity, and benefit from associated economic gains. I think there's enough research to show that every dollar that is invested will, into scaling up of treatment for common mental disorders has, 4x return in improved health and productivity. Mental Health Foundation Australia aims to engage with the current and former police officers with lived experience of mental health, government representatives, work with mental health professionals and relevant organizations lobbying for better mental health, to formulate recommendations to be shared with all levels of government, I guess, in order to make a meaningful difference. On behalf of Infosys, I would like to thank MFHA for providing this opportunity to partner and promote mental health awareness in workplaces. I mean, today, Carla, we have a distinguished line of speakers to discuss and further explore the mental health of police personnel through constructive and open discussions. I am looking forward to learning and hearing about it all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ashok, and to emphasis for the continued support.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I would now like to invite our first speaker for today, Helen Hall. Helen is a professional supervisor and trainer at Amavita International, a leader in strategy, management, and leadership consulting. We offer a range of human resource services and facilitate over 45 training presentations in leadership, neuroscience, and performance. Please join me in welcoming Helen.
Thank you, Carla, and it is my honor to be here. I'm just sharing my screen. I hope you can see it, hopefully. Can you
confirm?
Can you please confirm that you can see my screen? That would be great.
I can see you, yep.
So they did say that I would have sharing capability, so let's hope that we got that. Okay, there we go. Now can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Excellent. Okay. So as Carla introduced, my name is Helen Hall. I'm a professional supervisor and trainer for Amavita International. And I am here to brief you on how evidence-based frameworks centered around reflective practice can be instrumental in your professional capability. But first, I'd like to ask you, what are your broken windows? As a policing theory, the broken window theory can be quite controversial. However, when we consider it in terms of signs of disorder, chaos, inner and outer conflict, lack of control and dysfunction, we can consider it on a personal level. The term "I am broken" can often be used by people who are experiencing these signs, and it is often due to stress and burnout, vicarious stress, moral distress, moral injury, and trauma. As we know, vicarious stress is indirect trauma that can occur when we are exposed to difficult or disturbing images and stories secondhand. Moral injury can result from extraordinary critical life events during which a person perpetrates, fails to prevent, or witnesses actions that transgress deeply held moral beliefs and expectations. Moral distress can occur when one knows the right thing to do, but institutional constraints make it nearly impossible to pursue the right course of action, and involves feelings of powerlessness in high intense environments and high responsibility. An evidence-based systematic review of frontline workers, including police personnel, focused on vicarious stress, moral distress, moral injury, and to an extent trauma. The evidence demonstrates that the core experience of this distress results from disconnect between personal core values, formal and informal organizational values, vocational duties, and expectations. The evidence points to the impact of these on professional attitudes, job satisfaction, absenteeism, burnout, compassion fatigue, and leaving the profession. From a psychological perspective, these experiences can be correlated with guilt, frustration, self-harm, shame, loss of spirituality or religiosity, lack of trust, or a sense of rejection, and feelings of being damaged or broken. Police officers must perform their tasks and their official duties and make decisions in accordance with organizational values. Namely, you have a mandate to do what is right, as well as to serve and to protect with integrity and judiciousness. However, the situations officers often encounter involve critical incidents traumatic events, and other atrocities. Additionally, situations or incidents also arise that involve responsive, tactical decision-making or enforcing law or protecting people that can conflict with personal moral standards. Therefore, vicarious stress, moral distress, and injury may reflect what happens to the individual faced in these situations. Evidence highlights the importance of self-care involving engagement in pleasant activities, as well as seeking help regarding forgiveness of others and self, building gratitude and restoring a sense of purpose in life. From a professional perspective, professional supervision is indicated as an important area for reflection and around evidence-based practice, around ethical dilemmas, congruency between personal values and organizational values, validation and support, and targeting capability to support vocational duties. One of the services that Amavita provide is evidence-based professional supervision. Supervision provides a secure space for reflective practice on all aspects of vocational duties in order for supervisees to maintain competence and capability in their role and to maintain effective practice while feeling supported. It gives opportunity to discuss and reflect on personal values, organizational values, and culture, and ethical dilemmas. It upholds professional identity as the key pillar of self in the work setting. Our most commonly used evidence-based frameworks are our LACE and PACE models. These models provide framework for discussions in a way to help navigate discussion that result in effective outcomes. Typically, what we see and what we find when a supervisee is experiencing stress and burnout, vicarious stress, moral distress or moral injury, or has experienced trauma, their neuro pathways are wired in an unhelpful loop that are well-traveled pathways that have established ways of thinking, feeling, and doing. Through evidence-based reflective practice, we can target and challenge the brain to start pioneering new ways of thinking and new neuro pathways. If you imagine a well-worn bush track that is a path always taken, this is the established path that people will naturally travel because it is the established way to go. However, if you pioneer a new path and you consistently walk and pioneer that new path, then the more that new path is traveled, it becomes the established path, and the old path can grow over and become less traveled. When pioneering new tracks, you need to push through brush and thorns and sticks and be consistent in traveling that path. This is the same as when building new neuro pathways in the brain. There will be barriers. However, the more consistent you are in practicing traveling that pathway, the more it will become established and the old neuro pathway will become less traveled. This is neuroplasticity, and it is critical for professional capability. There are some broken windows that can be restored. And at Amavita, from a professional perspective, we would love to support you in that. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen, for joining us and sharing your insights with us this morning. When I go on to speak about my stuff, I'm actually, what you've just discussed, you'll see it in a lived experience. So it's, I also mentioned the term broken. So we'll looking forward to hearing your opinions on that. A token of our appreciation will also be posted to you. Thank you. I would now like to invite Danielle Baldock. Danielle completed her Bachelor of Psychology at UWA before serving as a WA police officer for 6 years. In 2018, she left the police to pursue her psychology career. Danielle is a registered psychologist trained in schema therapy, imagery, rescripting, and eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, EMDR. Danielle has a special interest in trauma, including childhood adverse experiences, combat trauma, first responder and military-related trauma, and sexual assault and abuse. She is trained in trauma processing modalities in order to better provide effective treatment for these experiences. She is a long-time staff member at the Sexual Assault Resource Centre, the SARC, where she honed her skills in trauma therapy. She has also worked at Victim Support and Child Witness Service, WA Police Health and Welfare, KMH's Childbirth and Mental Illness Clinic, Soldier On, and at HMAS Stirling for Serco. In 2018, she joined the Australian Army Reserves as a psychology officer. Please join me in welcoming Danielle.
Hi everybody, good morning. Sorry, it's very early here in WA. So it's children getting ready in the morning time. So we've just been running around a bit. I have a very short presentation for you. I do have slides. I don't know if I can share them. I'll send them through later. But I just wanted to talk to you about soldiers and sirens. So our main tagline, I guess, is that we believe in thriving, and we think that's something different. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. So welcome. I completed my psychology degree at the University of Western Australia in 2001. I did a postgraduate diploma in counselling and then a master's in 2020. So I'm a registered psychologist. I worked for the police for 6 years and then lots of different trauma agencies and finally the Army. And then in 2018, I created Soldiers and Sirens, myself and a ex-VicPol / ex-WAPOL police officer, Daniel Bates. And we put it together to meet the need that we saw, where there was no special service for police officers. And then what we realised was there was no special service for any first responders. And we wanted to create this kind of community of, we call it our multi-uniform community, where everybody who's served is welcome. And unlike a normal psych service, we wanted it to be a family. So we wanted to get that sense of camaraderie back. So our mission is to provide current and ex-serving military and first responders and their families a safe and connected community in which to improve and maintain their mental and physical well-being. So in terms of who we see, unfortunately, we had to close our doors in August 2021 because we ran out of funding, but we're on our way to reopening in August 2022. So over the time that we were open, we saw approximately 75% male, 25% female clients, and that kind of reflects what you see in the services in terms of who serves. So our biggest percentage of clients at 47% was current serving WA Police, followed by military, federal police, Department of Fire and Emergency Services, allied forces, and corrections, so prison officers. Our biggest presenting issue, as you can imagine, was PTSD at 50% of our referrals, and then mixed depression, anxiety, major depressive disorder, and stress. We used the depression, anxiety, stress scale and the PCL, which is a PTSD measure, to measure how we were doing. Our highest PTSD score before was at 59, and our lowest after was at 0. So we believe that you can get back to thriving. I guess the couple of key messages I just wanted to bring across today, and the audience is probably fully aware of this, but the big one I find civilian organisations, like mental health organisations, might not understand is that uniform as identity, and why some people don't want to leave. And I really didn't understand this until one of my colleagues, who was a civilian counsellor, said, but usually if something upsets you, you get away from it, which made complete sense. But with serving, it's not that way. You know, being a police officer, being in the army, being in the military, firefighter, it really is who you are, not what you do. And so it was really, really difficult to just walk away from that. And so what we want to do is give people the option. So instead of going, do you know what, you've been to all these traumatic incidents, maybe you should get out, is you've been to all these traumatic incidents, let's figure out a way to recover and get you back quality of life so you can keep serving. And the other thing that we do is we talk about mental health issues as being superpowers. So I often get people to go and watch the movie Venom, because the idea of that movie is that this big destructive force that is inside of him, he has to learn how to make it so he's in control rather than it being in control of him. And sometimes I find this with men experiencing PTSD, especially after they've had to kill in combat or some other action that they then can't reconcile with their own identity. And so Venom is about that. Like, how do you use what's happening for you? So whatever your mental health issue is, it's turned up for a reason. It's turned up to help you in some way. So depression might turn up because you need a rest, you know, and it says, hey, let's stay in bed today and eat junk food and not talk to anyone. And that's really great for a minute. And the same with anxiety, who says, oh my gosh, this could go wrong, that could go wrong, what's our plan? Really helpful. PTSD is the same, tells you where all your threats are, where all your exits are. But when you first start experiencing these things, you know, you don't know what to do with them, and they tend to take over and you tend to try to get away from them. So what we want people to do is make friends with it, use it as your superpower, and then get back to that thriving and that quality of life. We also, our mantra is eat, rest, move. So we're always saying to people, get out and exercise, whatever that looks like for you. Are you having fun is the big one. Rest, you know, even if you're not sleeping, rest and get out there and hang out with people who make you feel good about yourself. Friends, family, professional help, and support groups. So Soldiers and Sirens continues to exist. We're a board only at the moment. But we do have our website still live, our social media is still going, our bank account's still there, people are still fundraising. We've got a big community forum coming up and all on our way to reopening next year. So if you want to get in contact, feel free. Thank you so much for this opportunity today.
Thank you, Danielle, for joining us. And we'll send through a token of our appreciation. I would now like to invite Simon and Sean from Beyond the Badge to address us. Simon, the founder and director of Beyond the Badge, is a former New South Wales police officer who transitioned to the private sector career in 2004. A combination of practical skills and lived experience developed throughout a 17-year policing career provided important foundational skills that supported Simon's career transition. Sean, also founder and director of Beyond the Badge, has over 30 years experience in law enforcement, corporate security, risk management, learning and development, international air express and logistics. Sean started his career with the West Australia Police before moving to Sydney, where he was involved in a number of consultancies, providing high-risk training programs to both commercial and government clients. Please join me in welcoming Simon and Sean.
Thanks, Carla, and we are super excited to share our stories and share all the good news. And with us in spirit today are the over 130 people that we've worked with to help them essentially be more employable. So one of the challenging questions for first responders when they move and look at a new role is this. When they get asked the question at interview, tell me about yourself. How do you answer that? Beyond the Badge was created because a former colleague of mine had that difficulty. He left the police, He worked in the private sector. He came back to the police and then went back to working for a not-for-profit. He couldn't find his way, and ultimately it led to him taking his life. The reaction of that from me and a couple of my other colleagues was that we wanted to know what support was being provided to police, not so much in the mental health space, because we've heard from the wonderful speakers already today that there is so much done around the mental health research, but we wanted to understand what are some of the practical programs available to help first responders, when they're ready, move to the next step. And that next step was, how do I build a resume that uses language that employers understand? How do I write a resume that's achievement focused and focuses on the wins and the achievements and the competencies that I've experienced within my service? And then when they get to an interview, how do I end the interview? What are the next steps? So the program essentially is about helping first responders and making them more employable. And the way we do that is we help them write a CV. We coach them into how to respond to interview questions, how to research prior to an interview, how to choose a role, what type of industry do they want to work in. And the absolute focus of the program is, and this is a really tough one for first responders, is we teach them that they need to sell themselves. Now, as first responders, Sean and I are well aware that the nature of first responders isn't typically that they walk down the street with their arms in the air, telling everyone how good they are. Pretty humble type people. But what we say to our colleagues is this, that if you go into an interview and you're humble, you're going to significantly reduce the chance of you winning the role. So this whole concept of being able to sell yourself at interview, at a phone screen, within written format is really the focus of the program. At the start of the program, we identify those factors that make first responders really attractive to employers. And they're quite simple things. The unbelievable levels of resilience that first responders have, their capacity to manage stakeholders and develop relationships, managing conflict, and their work ethic. And the analogy that I often use is that many of the, well, I would say most of the customers of the first responders have an absolute dislike for them. Yet every other day, first responders are getting recognised for the way they deal with people. So imagine when a first responder works for a company that the customers actually like them. This analogy that first responders can only fit into the security and investigative type roles, we break that model. And shortly, I'm going to invite Sean to talk about how the program works with corporates, some of our successes. And Sean's going to talk to you a little bit about one of our case studies where we often have people come to us and they've been diagnosed that I will never work again. Well, we've broken that mode on a number of occasions, and Sean's going to talk about that. I might hand over to Sean to continue on. Thanks, mate.
Thanks, Simon, and thanks for this invite. Very privileged to be among you all. I firstly just want to touch on a very important survey that was conducted by Beyond Blue in 2018. 22,000 first responders were interviewed. And one of the highlights, I suppose, for us in terms of putting a spotlight on this is that 3 in 4 employees of those agencies found that the current workers' compensation process to be detrimental to their recovery. And among employees with probable PTSD who made a claim, 75% felt it had a negative impact on their recovery. That for us is the foundation, I suppose, of why we do what we do. And a great story, a great case study to highlight that is a young man who came to us nearly 3 years ago. He was a senior investigator with a police agency. He'd been working on a very high profile and disturbing case. He went off work and was basically told he would never work again. He sat on the lounge for 7 years, kids growing up around him. He felt lost, felt that he had no respect of his wife and his kids. he came on the program as a result of some intense post-program support work. He applied and obtained a great role with the government. He's now had a secondary role. He works as a senior officer in a government department. His highlight of all that story is, I'm proud to say to my kids every day, hey guys, Dad's off to work today. His life's back on track. That's a very brief summary of a long story, but typically the people who are coming to the program, 70, 80%, I would say, have similar stories. And our role now and our purpose in having Beyond the Badge out there is to get these people back on track. We believe that having a sense of purpose, as Helen said earlier on, is part of that mental health well-being repair that we can be involved in. We have a great network of corporate partners that support us and help us with a range of things, including opportunities for work. And in fact, we have around a 92% success rate of those who are seeking work getting into employment. So overall, we're very pleased with the support we have, the work we're doing. We're very passionate about it. We're both former first responders who've been through the journey, and we have that trust. And we're again very excited to be part of this forum today, and look forward to working with you all in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Simon and Sean. Speaking from experience, I have PTSD in the job, and one of the biggest things for me in my recovery was hope. And just by listening to both of you speak, having that hope is honestly something that is, people who don't suffer from PTSD or have had trauma, when you don't have hope, it's just a confounding effect. So thank you so much for the work that you're doing. It's nice for me to hear from my own perspective.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I would like to now diverge from the role of MC to the role of speaker, and I've got Donna introducing me because it feels a bit weird talking about myself. And as I've just been hearing, we are humble people, and it gets a bit embarrassing when you're mentioning your accolades and different things. So thank you, Donna.
Good morning, folks, and welcome. Thank you, Mental Health Foundation Australia, for having me today. And it is an absolute honour to introduce to you your MC as the speaker, Carla Duncan. And a current serving Operation Police Officer in Australian Federal Police. Carla has first served as a General Duties Officer, ACT Policing, spent time in homicide, response to crime, and currently working in Brisbane Joint Task Force for Queensland Police, Australian Border Force targeting drug operations. However, in 2018, Carla was involved in a critical incident whilst a probationary police officer in general duties. She responded to a routine theft job with two sergeants. The offender set a large American pit bull onto those officers. 3 cans of OC spray, 2 taser cartridges, and a firearm were deployed in an attempt to stop the dog. Carla protected her colleagues during the incident and ran in front of them and suffered significant injuries. She has endured 5 surgeries, 3 months in a wheelchair, and significant trauma resulting in the diagnosis of PTSD and ongoing physical injuries. Carla was awarded the Commissioner's Bravery Medal for her efforts on that day. Carla has received the James Cook University Outstanding Early Career Award last year for her efforts and continued work on mental health stigma for police. She was nominated for Police Federation National Bravery Award in 2019 and since embarked on public speaking in varieties of fields, including mental health, trauma, domestic violence, and resilience. She's returned from postgraduate studies in criminology and has a passion for developing programs and research in post-traumatic growth, particularly in police officers in Australia. Carla, I hand over to you, and it is a pleasure to meet you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Donna. It's very hard to hear someone else speak about those things. When I talk about it myself, it becomes so automatic, but when you're hearing it from someone else, it still gives me a little shiver of that day. So for me, having a diagnosis of PTSD so early in my career, I was only in the job 18 months. And when I heard that diagnosis, and having that label, I just sat there and I remember crying to my husband and just saying, I've worked 10 years to get here. I used to work in detention and spent 8 years, and also studying university. In my dreams since I was 3 years old. It's not only identity, but I honestly believe it is a calling for a lot of police officers and people in emergency services. Now, thankfully for me, I've had a lot of support from Comcare and the AFP and the AFPA. My recovery and ongoing recovery while being operational is holistic. Now, the term broken, we've heard Helen mention it, and that's been thrown out to me several times. I felt that term within myself, particularly after I heard the audio of me getting attacked. The first time I heard it was when I was in court and I gave my victim impact statement. And when I heard that, and I heard how it's horrendous, you can just Google my name and click the link. And when they, after court, the media released it. And when I heard that audio, and I obviously received the bravery medal beforehand, and it said that I was composed and tenacious. And I remember turning around at court and looking at one of my bosses, and I said to him, I don't know why you gave me that medal, because there is nothing composed about that. It is, it doesn't even sound like me. I'm at first I'm very angry and I'm swearing a lot and using a lot of expletives because I was angry at the start, but then it just became terror. And when I heard that terror and heard that everyone could hear it, all the police forces were talking, it honestly was the most vulnerable position I've ever been in my life, that the whole world can hear me at when I thought I was going to die. And so when that happened and I heard that, I just started doubting my abilities and what can I offer the job now, and also my career trajectory, because when I started, I wanted to, be in tactical or, discreet ops or an undercover role or something. And, and my whole world was ahead of me until that moment. Thankfully, I was given the opportunity when I was recovering, and I had most of my surgeries as I was going back on light duties. I had a superintendent who knew me, like I knew a lot of people at work, and I had such overwhelming support, particularly in the hospital. I had, I woke up that morning and honestly, I've just seen a sea of blue and flowers and just people just coming through. And honestly, that is what it felt like to me to be in the Blue family. I'd never, you hear about it, but I actually got to witness it myself. And it was the most overwhelming thing that's ever happened. So thankfully I was placed in homicide to work, which sparked my interest. It kept me motivated and allowed me to attend my rehabilitation and therapy. Having bosses get together and plan my recovery was what gave me purpose and drive again to fight my way back to being operational, because I had an injury with my hand, because my hand got, nearly severed 2 of my fingers and degloved. And I had several operations on it because my hand was like a claw, and the surgeon said to me, I want you to be prepared because you may not ever be operational again. And hearing that is just that, I sat there and thought, this is not going to happen to me. I've worked too hard to get there. I want to get back. And having that opportunity to work in an area that just, was captivating. I was working with really experienced detectives. That's what kept that fight up for me. And when feeling broken, your future is unknown, and it's an extremely delicate time, as that time was for me when I was returning to work after, a critical incident. If it wasn't handled correctly by leaders and my teammates in a suited area to where you want to go to spark that interest, who knows where I'd be now. And it also gave me the time to work out, like, why did I join the job? What's going back to square one of why I was, so you can, try and retrain that brain to be like, it's okay, we can get forward. For me personally, as I was saying, like, I had key leaders from the top of the organisation, such as the Commissioner Andrew Colvin, who called and visited, at a time when I was in a really vulnerable state. Assistant Commissioner Justine Saunders, who's now the Deputy Commissioner for Border Force, she visited me in hospital, at my home, would check in on me. And the kindness of so many in the organisations, from superintendents, my peers, to inspectors, and even just down to different areas within ACT Policing and national emails and phone calls, and just those acts of kindness with so many from the organisation. It gave me the strength, but also made me feel comfortable to be able to ask for specific help. I felt safe within my rehabilitation officer and my Comcare case officer. When things weren't working, they listened to me and what I wanted, and we tried different things which were outside the box. And giving someone that bit of control back, or that autonomy to be able to choose something for themselves, it has a profound effect on that person. They feel like they are included in this. They're not just this broken biscuit or this victim that can't, control their own life or own recovery. It was to the point where I did exposure therapy with AFP National Canine. And, we did a walk, crawl, run method, and I finally ended up getting into a bite arm on the arm that, I nearly lost my hand. And that was a crucial moment in my recovery, and we've got Helen talking about neuroplasticity, me getting in, after a long period of time, probably about 6-7 months of doing that work, those neural pathways change. Rather than me being, constantly scared that I'm going to get attacked by a dog, I ended up being comfortable enough to be able to do that. And that after that, actually being able to confront that fear, I felt to myself after I'd had all my surgeries, I think I'm comfortable enough to go back to being, in operational policing. And I was also transferred to Queensland, where I had my family support up here, and Aussies back into an area in uniform policing at the airport. It wasn't exactly where I wanted to be with my career, but at the time it was actually crucial because it was a slow step, moment for me to get back to the bare basics of what, policing is. It was also calmer, and it allowed me to get my confidence back up. When I transferred up here, I had the executive leader of this command, which is, Assistant Commissioner Lisa Gale, reach out to me and put me in touch with people who have been through critical incidents up here, and offer me peer support. I still have ongoing checkups with welfare and my treating team, which are external to the job, as I'm still recovering. And, every day, some days I'm great and other days I'm not. But it's just, for me, it's just one step at a time. But I feel like I have that nurturing of the organisation and, my treating team to be able to get there. It's been 3 years since my incident, and I'm now at a state where I can see my career path. It is changed to when I was in Canberra, but I know I have hope. I have a plan and I have purpose. I also have control over my future because the job, obviously, like I said before, has nurtured me to be able to do that. What I've identified along the way, though, is that I have triggers, but I've also discovered that I have a lot of strength. That strength is from post-traumatic growth. Due to having the overwhelming support in so many areas that have helped me holistically, I was able to grow from what happened to me. And that is the key message. It's having key leaders who understand what it's like to go through something like that and provide ongoing care and interest, from where it starts. Even though as a police officer, even though a police officer might have a psychological injury, they have skills and motivations to still contribute in some sort of capacity. PTSD doesn't necessarily mean you're triggered to everything related to policing. You have strengths and resilience in so many other areas that, that you can contribute to that organisation that you work for. And they should have an understanding and be able to harness those strengths. And that will also contribute to more post-traumatic growth. People who have survived and handled themselves in a life and death situation as a police officer have a set of skills and attributes that not a lot have or have been tested in. So that term broken shouldn't exist, because we aren't. We're survivors and we're strong. Police officers with a diagnosis of PTSD can offer so much knowledge to recruits, existing members, and police leadership worldwide. Harnessing that knowledge and lived experience also gives purpose to those who have given that sacrifice. My story and my recovery isn't the same. And unfortunately, not a lot of, so many people across different jurisdictions haven't had that nurturing that I have. So how I started doing this public speaking was I want to promote what worked. The job fought outside the box with me, and it related to individual case officers in Comcare, in the ACT rehabilitation, leaders everywhere, friends. And that's why I do public speaking. I don't know how I sort of stumbled upon it, but for me, it gives me purpose as well to be able to show this is what's needed to rehabilitate someone. Some days I find myself, oh gosh, I wish I didn't have this chronic illness that I'm dealing with, but I can't change it. And I want to make everyone feel as supported as what I have in the job, because I know not every story is like this. I've also recently started a social media page in a sense to provide information for people, who are going through different areas of trauma and mental health, and that's carla.duncan.au. But for me, I wanted to offer it. It's not for profit. It's just to offer information and legitimate readings and researchers and services that are around. Because I honestly think every single police force worldwide should be putting in as much effort and care and nurturing that I was offered. So thank you. Now I'm going to flip back to MC. And I would now like to invite Daniel Sundal. Daniel Sundal is a published artist and writer and has 3 art books produced of his works. Articles of his work are featured in Canadian Paramedicine, Journal of Emergency Medicine, JEMS, Fire Rescue Magazine, EMS1, EMS World Magazine, and the Canadian Journal of Emergency Nursing. His art is recognised worldwide, and he travels internationally speaking on his art and personal experiences with occupational stress injuries and post-traumatic growth. Daniel is the president and founder of the Peer Recovery and Resiliency Society, a group that supports emergency workers from around the world and aids in their post-traumatic growth. He's also an advanced care paramedic, firefighter, pre-hospital educator, photographer, and photo editor. Please join me in welcoming Daniel all the way from Canada.
Oh, thank you, Carla. And thanks for having me at this event. And Carla, thank you for sharing your story. It's wonderful. I'm kind of glad that I went a little bit later because all the speakers so far just kind of validate what I believe and I know to be true. So a little bit more about me. I'm a advanced care paramedic and firefighter. I was first diagnosed with PTSD in 2014. And that's where I started creating the artwork. So I also create artwork under the, the artist name Dan Sun. And when I started creating the artwork, that's when many of my peers saw it and attached their own experiences to it. And that really changed my life. So in many ways, the trauma that I received from the injury, from the long career that I've had up to that point, made me create this artwork, which resulted in my own post-traumatic growth, which I'm going to want to talk a little bit more about. But because of that, I get invited to speak and exhibit my artwork all around the world. And the best part is I get to speak with my peers and I speak with fellow emergency workers. And I really want to know about, what mental health supports they have, what's it like to work in their significant area or their specific area. And I feel like I've really learned a lot from traveling all around the world and speaking to so many of my peers. And I've kind of gathered this information. And now what I'm really passionate about is post-traumatic growth. And, Danielle, you talked about that. And Carla, you are living proof of that. And Carla, I might even get you to talk at one of our conferences where we have a whole conference specifically about post-traumatic growth because I get to travel and I hear the stories. Because when I create the artwork, it is still personal to me. It is still part of my therapy. It's how I purge and process the things, but I'm always worried about the person that needs the mental health support. It's wonderful that all these initiatives are out there, but I'm always thinking, is that going to get to the person that needs it? Because I know that I was there, many of us were. And I think sometimes we lose the idea, or we don't understand that the person that really needs the support, or someone that is really injured from their mental experiences, from the trauma they've received, their brain chemistry changes and they lose the capacity sometimes to even know that they're in trouble, right? So you can have all the mental health supports, but if they don't know they're even sick, like for me, I had a suicide plan, I had my own death plan, and I went to work every day and I was a good paramedic, I was a good firefighter. I put on my I'm okay suit and I didn't even know I didn't have the capacity because my brain chemistry was all messed up, that I thought, okay, yeah, it's kind of normal when I go home from work today, I'm going to drive in front of a giant truck if I see it. And saying it out loud is just crazy. But for those of us that have been there, our brain chemistry is altered. So I think it's really important. I public speak, I talk about post-traumatic growth and my own experiences for those people that may not even know that they're in trouble. And when I tell them the ideas of post-traumatic growth, and Danielle, you had a great analogy of Venom, but if you think Spider-Man and Batman, who, they see their relatives get killed and now they become these big superheroes. we're the same. It's this silver lining around this dark cloud. So for that one first responder that's maybe listening to me, or even listening to this broadcast today, that is really contemplating their life and have lost the brain chemistry to have a healthy mind because of the trauma they've received, that might be the spark that really saves their life. If they can see experiences of their peers like Carla and myself, I am better because of the injury that I've had. I'm doing things that I would not have done. And my PTSD kind of came back and whipped at me and kind of stung me again. And I'm now having these new symptoms, but I know what they are. I recognize them because of the experiences I've had in the past. So I think it's really important to talk about post-traumatic growth. We were supposed to actually have our conference in Melbourne this year, but COVID kind of kicked out, but we're going to do it. We're going to maybe do it in a couple of years there. So I'm very passionate about post-traumatic growth, and I think it's a really important message to put out there. The other thing I'm very passionate about is sanctuary trauma. And sanctuary trauma was first coined in the Vietnam War, where these war veterans would come home and they were expecting support from their government and families and friends, but they only received more trauma. And I do a lot of studying on this, and there's a lot of studies out there. There was one in Canada in 2020, and in England, there was one in 2020, and then the Beyond Blue, I think someone mentioned that one, where they show that the source of a lot of our trauma isn't necessarily the traumatic calls that we've been on. I call them the expected traumas, the traumas that we know we're going to see when we're first responders, but it's the controllable stressors, though, the work environment, where a lot of these studies show that is what is the cause of a lot of our trauma. And there's been some interesting studies and work around that field of sanctuary trauma. Dr. Jonathan Douglas from Western Canada, he does a lot of work actually with insurance agencies, and he does a lot of interviews for people that are in car accidents. And he found that what happens after the accident, so let's say we're referring to emergency workers, what happens to us after that initial trauma that we had is a better predictor of whether or not we're going to return to work and recover. Again, Carla, you're a good example. You received your trauma and you were in a nurturing, protective, a psychologically safe work environment where your supervisors and leaders supported what you did. But that is not not in my own experience, but from many of the emergency workers that I've spoken to, that is not usually the case. And because of that, so if and I did a picture, I should have maybe shared my screen with that picture. I did a picture about sanctuary trauma with a firefighter, and he's sitting down and he's got this candle that says PTSD on it, and the flame represents his trauma. So that could have been, an emergency call that he went on, but he's doing his best to kind of manage it. It's okay. But his supervisor, so an officer, is blindfolded because he doesn't really know the concept of sanctuary trauma and how much power he has for this firefighter's recovery, is pouring gasoline on him. It's a very powerful image. But I think that is the reality for many of us. And I hear from that from my peers all over the world, that, what happens after the trauma, I think is a better predictor of whether or not we're going to return to work and we're going to recover. And that's why I think it's great. Helen, you're talking about professional supervisors. That's great. In Australia, and I don't know if you guys know that, but here in North America, we look at Australia as being, 20 years in the future of mental health awareness. And you may not see it because you're there, but the things that you guys are doing over there are things that I really promote over here, because I think it's a lot more normalized there than it is here. And I think we could really learn and benefit from a lot of the things that you are doing, like supervisor training, with educating them in the idea of sanctuary trauma. And perceived injustice is another thing, but perceived doesn't mean it's not right, that it's incorrect, but it's we all perceive things. But if we can control that sense of perceived injustice and sanctuary trauma after that initial trauma, then we could save lives, really. But I think we really don't know what we're doing, and there needs to be training. And I think that work environment needs more information. And it's not only the work environment, it's family, it's friends, it's the whole environment for that person that has received that trauma. And the possibilities of, and Simon, you mentioned this about the resiliency, unfortunately, for those of us that have this trauma, this injury, and we do the work, that's a benefit to employers. Unfortunately, many employers see us as damaged, right? And that's when we start talking about stigma. And I think it's the absolute opposite. I think leaders could recognize people that go through that gauntlet of trauma and recovery and come out a better person on the end. They are a better employee. They're a better first responder. And I see examples of that and proof of that all the time. And I wish more people knew about it. But again, what I really focus on is that one person that has that altered brain chemistry because of their trauma, and they don't even know that they're in trouble, that they hear about these things. They hear about these wonderful stories. What I am doing, I'm traveling, what Carla is doing, what all these other emergency workers and first responders are doing now because of their trauma. But you need to do that work, and they need to be nurtured. They need to be in a supportive work environment with educated or trauma-informed supervisors and leaders and coworkers and family and friends. And I think that's really important, and I think more of a predictor of whether or not we're going to recover and return to work. I think I could just start talking and talking and talking.
That's
I don't know how
okay.
long I've been.
That's right.
I think that's 5. I think that's 5 minutes. But so I'll end it there. But again, thanks so much for having me at this
Thank
event.
you.
I'm really excited to be here.
You know what's the other thing I'm going to add on to you, which I got a bit nervous while I was speaking because a lot of it was off the cuff. But one of the things with that hypervigilance and that change in our neurochemistry is like obviously the hypersensitivity. But for me, I find so many people who have been through a critical incident, we have such increased empathy. And with that empathy comes like the ability to read people better, to read situations better, to analyze a situation, whether it be threatening or non-threatening, in a higher level. And I remember talking to Donna last night, and I said to her, I sometimes feel like I have a sixth sense now with this. It was always there. But for me, I find if you can harness that power with that person and realize what their strengths and build on their strengths that they already have and utilize them, and also working on their weaknesses, like you've got a person that is an untapped resource, as you said. And
100%.
The moment we stop looking at this brokenness and this stigma and have a look at what we offer is a moment I think you'll find more people will get early intervention. And Danielle obviously does a lot of EMDR therapy, and I did that first. So I got in with early intervention so quickly, and that is crucial to why I'm still operational now. But thank you so much again, and a token of our appreciation will be sent to you.
Thank you
It's
so
very
much.
hard. It's hard for all speakers here today, and including myself, to be able to put down such an important message into 5 or 7 minutes. And I think hopefully with COVID, when it opens up, we can actually have a forum that actually has people to really tell their story with lived experience. I think we'll get a lot of change happening. So I wanted to thank you all for being able to concise your stories in such a short amount of time. But what we'll do is we'll now move on to the panel discussion with some of our speakers today. Please feel free to put your questions in the Q&A section of this webinar, and they can be directed to our speakers as well. And I'm going to try my best to be able to work the technology out with that. But what I'll do is I'll if we can, I'm not sure if the tech team can put us all up so we can see each other on the screens or whatever, if that would help rather than just one of us. But the first question I have here today is, what are the unique psychosocial hazards of working in the police force? And I'll start with our first speaker. And Ashok, we'll go from you.
Yeah. Thanks, Carla. Given that I actually come from a tech industry, so I really cannot, elaborate specifically around the police force part of it. I can actually give you a view from knowledge industry, which is predominantly around technology. And what we face compared to what all of you have, some of you have had, personal stories. Some of you have been very closely involved with the personal around PT growth and things like that. But what's interesting is within, when you actually look at just the prevalence rate of mental health, police force, I think, has, around somewhere between 30 to 32%, while generally in Australia across professions is about 45%. The seriousness of it is not as high as we actually see in a very high risk, high environment like a police force or like the frontline services one. But interestingly, within IT, 56% of people actually report on mental health issues, and I don't believe there is there's never enough that we can actually do to care of it. I think we did hear from Dan and others around trauma-informed supervision. But when I actually correlate that into a knowledge working, technology side of things, I think the important aspects around safety, around trust and transparency, the peer support, the collaborative work nature, empowerment to actually make decisions, even though it might be in small pieces, and providing a nurturing and a safe environment. I mean, I think all of that is equally applicable, I guess, in an industry like ours. So I'm sorry to actually not be able to actually give specifics around the police force, but I think I can actually draw correlations between, I guess, what happens in a profession like a police force versus what we actually experience within a knowledge services industry like information technology.
If anyone else on the panel can answer that, I want to put their hand up before I go to the next question. Danielle or Helen, would you like to have a look, try and answer the unique psychosocial hazards of working in the police force?
I think what I see is people often coming forward with sudden deaths that they've had to attend, whether that's traffic crashes, suicides, homicides, obviously, and domestic violence offences that they have to attend. And I think from outside the police, people, if they went to one of those things once in their life, they might be traumatized from that. And yet our first responders go every day, multiple times. And it's that culture in which you just keep going, I remember going to a sudden death and saying, okay, we're going to crib now. And then VKI would say, no, sorry, because now we've got, something else you have to go to. There was never that brief period of time to kind of even process that you'd been to something awful. And then you just go to the next one and you just add more and more and more traumas on top of the next one. And the culture is never to stop and think about that. And it's such to me then working at the Sex Assault Centre, where if we have a really difficult emergency case where we've seen someone come straight from crime scene and we've talked through and done their debrief, at that organisation, it's okay afterwards to go and write your notes, to go for a walk, to get a coffee, to go home if you need to. And we just had that ability to be flexible. And I always think it's like, if you're running 10K and you're at the 9K, mark, and oh, good, I've only got 1K to go. Where the end is. Whereas if there's traumas after traumas after traumas, and there is no end, and you can't be flexible and manage your own mental health by doing the things that you need to, you fall over at some point. You can't keep pushing on. And so I think that's it. It's the cumulative trauma. And then unfortunately, the not understanding about letting people choose. So don't send them home. Do you know what I mean? So don't let the organizations often say, oh, well, you should do this when there's been a critical incident. But actually what we need to do is give people a choice. What do you?
The autonomy.
Yeah, do you want to stay at work with your colleagues because that's where you've got purpose and you feel supported? Or do you want to go home and be with your family and hug your kids because whatever you went to, that's the thing you feel you need to do? And if we give people I think organizations often worry, oh, people will just go home and, but that's not what happens. People work harder, work longer, and are more invested because they know they have control over managing their own distress.
Yeah, I am actually looking at this. I've just, in one of the Q&As, a lady called Bronwyn's also had a discussion with her son as a police officer and says there seems to be a shame connected with seeking mental health support. Can this culture change? And I think that is one of the psychosocial hazards as well of working in the police force. And I know the shame that I experienced myself sometimes when I couldn't leave my house for 6 weeks, and I got that paranoid because my adrenaline was up for so long. But at the same time, because I had that nurturing, I could also freely express about it. And I find if people who have been through trauma recognize it and they help other peers, like that is a good way to start making that cultural change, to make it's like, it's not shameful, this is normal, it is okay to feel like this. And recognizing that will hopefully reduce that shame and that stigma. If anyone else from the panel would like to answer that same question, or let me know and I can move on to another one.
Yeah, Carl, I have a comment on that. I think if we group in emergency workers, and I include corrections and I include military as that family of emergency responders, I guess. I think the unique thing about enforcement or law enforcement, and I think the same goes for corrections, is that there's this expectation to be even more stoic than a firefighter or a paramedic or a nurse or a dispatcher. Like their perception or their persona needs to be more stoic and more strict than the rest of the emergency workers. So I think that puts a lot of pressure on them when they do have that mental injury to even admit. In my experiences of the many law enforcement and corrections officers that I've known, and I think of those that are most deeply injured from their trauma, it's police officers and it's corrections officers. And I'm wondering if that's maybe why.
Interesting. Anyone else want to?
Yeah, Carlo, I just want to add something there that in terms of psychosocial impact, I'll say hypervigilance, I'll say trust, and I'll say the sense of right. Now, I've lived with PTSD now for 15 years, and I've been able to turn that around in the corporate world where, Carla, you mentioned public speaking. Now, the best speakers in the world are first responders. And because Sean and I now have had an opportunity to look at living as a first responder and then working in the corporate community, the demand for first responders in the corporate world, we cannot place enough people. That's the challenge we've got, and what a great one. But when we talk about hypervigilance and we talk about trust as something that maybe is detrimental from our previous services, I want to turn it around. And I want to say from a hypervigilance piece, we are excellent. We have particular skills in horizon scanning, so risk scanning. That's one skill that you can't learn at university. The second one is we talk about trust. Well, let's convert that. We are risk assurance experts, and we are. We don't accept that things on paper. We want to make sure that they're implemented and they're led. And the third one is this sense of right and presence. We develop a presence as a first responder. People in corporate typically cannot mirror the presence that we have, and we do it naturally, and that is an unbelievable benefit to employers. And then lastly is one of the great call outs we get, and it was a beautiful line from a big employer, and it was simply this: in a crisis, who else would you want at work? But the crisis doesn't have to be the building falling down. The crisis could be, we've got senior executives leading, someone go out and find out what the problem is. Police, fireys, corrective services, they've got this mandate, and it's simply that we get things done. Thanks, Carla.
It was so well said. Anyone else from the panel? No, I'll move on to the next question. So the question was, what constitutes a mentally healthy workforce for police personnel? And I know some of these questions as well, we're probably answering them in advance anyway, because it's so holistic and complex, but I might ask Danielle, maybe you could answer that question, or Helen, first of all.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
That's okay. Yeah. What constitutes a mentally healthy workforce for police personnel?
I think, again, about options. Like, it's always about choice for me. I think that's really important. And WA Police have been doing such a great job in changing the offerings that they have now. They've got uniform welfare officers there. They've got civilian psychologists inside. They've got chaplains. They've got an EAP. And then what they added was a preferred provider list, which means it's people, psychologists that WA Police have checked and know who are capable of working with first responders, and then they pay for those sessions. And really that change in if people want to get out, helping them transition out. If people want to stay in, then let's get them well and keep them in. I think that's been the big change, is really the choice. So people know their mental health best. They should be able to choose what supports they want to have. And that's what's being enabled now. And I think hopefully the other first responder agencies will see what's happening there and start to move along that same sort of track.
For me, like I'll throw in my opinion of this. As I said before, like early intervention was the best thing for me. And, you're saying choice, but I think, having that culture of like, it's okay to get early intervention and just raising that awareness, like the earlier you get it in any form that you need, the more likely you are to recover from that, whether it's acute stress or ongoing or having an incident that affected you. And I think early intervention and acceptance and welcoming that treatment in a cultural way is very important. Anyone else want to add to that?
Carla, can I just make a couple of points?
Of course,
please?
you can.
Sorry, I was muted for some reason.
No, I was wondering. I was like, someone speak.
I muted myself. Look, I'm heartened by the conversation today. We hear a lot about mental health workplaces. My concern is, and I know I'm hoping that the 3 years hence from the Beyond Blue report, there's been lots of agencies scurrying around, doing better work, because when you talk about 75% of 22,000 first responders who have said very clearly when they put their hand up with a potential mental health / PTSD issue, that their recovery has gone downwards, not upwards. That doesn't sound like the words we've been using today, like being nurtured in a safe environment. So, and there were lots of recommendations out of that report, and I'm hoping that 3 years hence that some of those things have been implemented or starting to be implemented. And from what Danielle's saying, being an ex-WA police officer myself, having lots of people from my era still struggling, those are encouraging words if those things are happening. I'm also interested in Dan's comments to see that, from his perspective, that Australia is 20 years in front. It's not normally what we hear. And I think,
no, it's not.
Normally, over the years, we've looked across the oceans there and always thought we were 20 years behind. And then, and this is no disparity on you, Danielle, but since moving from WA to Sydney, I've always thought WA was 20 years behind the rest of the country. So it's just interesting when we start to look at perceptions of who looks at who and thinks they're doing better. I guess the only reality is.
Sorry, Sean, I was told that you can't be a prophet in your own village. Right? So you may not know the great things that you're doing.
Absolutely. I guess the only, the proof of the pudding is in the data and what we're seeing through data, and we can just keep making those positive impacts, and forums like this obviously are going to help. Having the conversation is what it's all about. So.
Anyone else? Well, this one, like I said, they all sort of tie into each other. The next question I've got is, what are ways we can reduce stigma of help-seeking police? For me, I'll give you the example, me just talking about it, having this diagnosis is why I do it, because it's so important, because I want everyone to experience that same nurturing and care and recovery that I have, because that's honestly my true fight, because if I didn't have that, I don't know where I'd be right now. So who wants to jump in first to answer that one?
I'll just jump in very quickly again. I think again, we've had some great conversation and understanding about the supervisory sort of concept. I think when you get an agency where, I think the understanding is at the moment, it depends where you work in that agency and who your boss is and who your supervisors are. There are some that will say, I'm very confident to go to my supervisor and tell him or her how I'm feeling, and I'm going to get a great response. We know there's others in that same agency who that same person may be very fearful of because of a known or the perceived response to that. So I think until we can get an organisation that when you measure that supervisory response to a person in experiencing trauma, that's when we're going to see some level of success. When there's a standardised approach across the board in that agency, that will be a measure of success in my view.
100%. Yeah, I feel like there's kind of this sandwich at the moment where the upper echelon, the commissioner, people are saying and doing all the right things, and then the junior officers coming through the bottom are much more open about mental health. I'm seeing people in the first few years of their career coming forward for mental health now saying, oh, I went to a couple of things, I started to have nightmares, I thought I'd sorted out now, which I'm like, wow, amazing.
So good.
Yeah, please. And then there's this middle layer of people who, like you say, some brilliant, might have had their own mental health stuff and now become a big advocate as a supervisor about doing what we need to do and having a trauma-informed workplace, and other people who are still stuck, 20 years ago, who are like, take a teaspoon of cement,
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And so 100%. Yeah. If we can get that standardization across the board where everyone's on the same page, that's when things will get safer. And
the key point there, I think, adding to that is education for not, from management, there's so many areas of the API and that do, that obviously promote new leaders that are coming through, and other areas. I think educating the up and coming who are in control of, officers who are returning to work and have that. I think education for them so they can understand it is crucial.
And sharing those stories of recovery.
Yep.
So that other people can say, oh, if I do put my hand up, it might be okay, or it is okay, and I can choose what happens to me next. Because I think at the moment that stigma is still, the minute I put my hand up, I'm getting transferred, I'm getting medically retired, I'm getting, whatever it is, I won't never get promoted again, or my colleagues won't want to work with me. Like, that's still so real and so scary.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. If I can just add, I mean, if I take the similarity of that within an IT industry. See, for us, I think it's very difficult to actually even identify triggers, because there is no external physical visual things that happen which will result in trauma within the organization, and it is very silent. So I think what Carla and Daniel, you were mentioning is very important for us. Is first and foremost, it is to have mechanisms or processes to identify when our colleagues or friends may be actually experiencing stress, going through difficult times, etc. And how do we actually watch out for those? Like people feeling empty, withdrawal, the absenteeism aspects of it. People in informal settings mentioning and having strong feelings of guilt and shame. These are things which we are actually seeing. But what has improved is that we have about 30 accredited mental health first aid officers who are part of the workforce. So everybody from managers, leaders, right down to software engineers, and we publish that. So recently, especially over the last 18-24 months, we've actually seen people coming up and saying that maybe they have an issue, and having those discussions in an environment where we believe we have created, which is a safe environment where people can actually talk about it. I mean, for us, in the knowledge working industry, if the stigma is still quite high. compared to other professions where I think there's maybe larger acceptance of it when people do actually come up with the trauma aspects of it. So I mean, from an IT perspective, I think we've got a long way to go and a lot to learn, from professions like the police force.
Yeah. And the other important thing is that change doesn't happen overnight. Change takes time, unfortunately, and but the thing is, as long as we're taking one step at a time to make that change is the most important part.
Yeah.
And so for me, if no one else wants to jump in, I've got another question to go on with. And how can one approach their colleague, family member, friend about their mental health whose behaviour has changed? Well, look, no one's going to answer. I'll jump in. So for me, when I noticed that I started going downhill, I had my husband who noticed that I wouldn't leave the house a lot, I wouldn't move, and he started trying to have those conversations. And at the time, I was so hypervigilant, I actually reacted quite badly to him. But he ended up, being a police officer himself, knowing who to call and who to change. So we subtly had those conversations. And I think the idea is education on that and how to promote it. And people need to feel like they're safe and not being judged. So starting those conversations has to, be handled delicately, unfortunately. But I'm sure others could, Helen or Danielle can use their professional expertise, or Daniel or Sean.
I guess my answer was going to be with great respect, being really gentle, just saying, hey, I've noticed, talk about the naive inquirer and using curiosity for that, and just saying, hey, I noticed this, I've noticed this change in you. What's happening? But I think people also need to feel safe that if the person says, I'm not okay, and this is what
handle it,
do they know what to do next?
Yeah.
That's super important, because otherwise it could make it worse, I guess.
Yeah. And that's like, that Are You Okay campaign. I always say to people, particularly when I do presentations, if you want to ask the question, are you okay? You've got to be prepared for not a good answer, and how, make sure if you're asking okay, that it's coming from a genuine care. Because if it's not, and you brush over it, that person that's going through trauma can see straight through it. And, as you said, you can make it worse. So I think being genuine is a very important aspect.
And Carl, if I can just add there that a technique was used on me was, and it happened a long time ago, where it was one of my supervisors told me about his story, and I'm sure he exaggerated the truth, but the story was, the last couple of weeks I've just been having these terrible nightmares about this particular matter, and that gave me the comfort to say, you know what, I've kind of had the same thing, and that built that conversation. Yeah. Whereas if even though he was such, and he's still a lifelong friend, if he had said to me, are you sleeping well? I would have said, yeah. You having nightmares? No. But the fact that he said it, and then it gave me the comfort to kind of say, oh, it must be okay to actually talk about this. I just found that as a useful technique.
Yeah. Not judged.
Not judged.
I think in my experiences here, you ask someone if they're okay, 99 out of 100 times and say, yeah, I'm fine. But I think, like Danielle said, if you can say, well, this is why I'm asking, there are some specific things that I've noticed in your behavior. And I think it's also important to not try to solve that problem for the person. And I see this a lot with family members where, okay, well, you should do this, you should do that. What we really need is we need to be validated, we need to be supported, and we need to be understood. So what can I do to help you? Or that must, that must be horrible. What can I do to help? Instead of, well, you should do this, you should do that. Because to have the sense, like Simon said, that we're not alone is a big deal. And sometimes we just need to be validated and supported, right? Just listen to what we have to say. Yeah. And that could be a huge thing alone. But you're right, you better be prepared for what the answer is going to be. And
that validation, as you said, it's and from my own experience, and I felt validated with how I was feeling, and it is, you just feel like you've been heard.
Yeah, and that's important.
Yeah, so important. Yeah. If no one else has something to say, I'll move on to the next question because we've got a couple more to go.
I guess it's just very quick. In the army, we teach people, you know, if you come across this situation where people are not okay, or they start to tell you things, that, you know, you listen, like you say, you don't have to fix it, give them some options, and then take them to help. So actually like walk with them to the health centre, to see a mental health professional, make a phone call, take them to their GP, whatever it is that they choose, because again, it has to be about choice, they choose to do, help them with that. And if it's really serious, if it's going down the suicide pathway, you can't keep a secret. You have to go and do something about that.
Yeah, very well said.
Carla, could I just add to that in reference to Simon, without mentioning names, of course, but there's a senior member or dignitary of policing who would often, and is known to do so, wander down and sit with the policing psychologist or mental health team, and the staff would see this gentleman doing this, and out of sheer curiosity, you know, a bit of a chin wagging over coffee, it was like, why would he do that? And the response we got back was, I don't need assistance at the moment, but if my staff see me doing it, that it's okay to reach out, then maybe that's the pathway I need to take. I don't have all the answers. I don't know all the answers, but if I can encourage someone to walk that path, then my walking down once a fortnight to see the psychologist and take up time in their chair may help someone who does need to reach out, that it is okay. And I think that's, we talk about leadership, but we also should acknowledge the stewardship around mental health from our leaders and our dignitaries in those roles.
Absolutely. The question is on there. What can be done? Like, this ties exactly to the next question. What can be done if someone doesn't want mental health assistance?
I think it's, oh, sorry.
That's all right, go for it, whoever's.
Yeah, look, I think, you know, one thing Danielle just mentioned, which is really important, is, you know, if they're your colleagues, you can't walk away. And I think, you know, if it's a monitoring brief that needs to happen from there, but certainly, you know, it's not enough to just ask a closed question and walk away from someone when you clearly can see there's an issue. So I think that monitoring and again, you know, in terms of no secrets and things, I think making an assessment, as Simon said, we're all good at risk assessment. You know, you can make an assessment of, is this just a minor little blurb for the day, or has this been an ongoing pattern? And I think taking that next step is really important. And again, having a workplace where you feel comfortable to do that, to go to a supervisor or someone else and share that problem, I think is really important, because there's lots of stories of people who've walked away and done nothing and had a lifelong regret from that. So I think it's, you know, it's that old sort of, you know, stop, look, assess and do something, you know, make some sort of action that's in the affirmative rather than just walking away and just forgetting about it. I think that's the important thing there.
And using that curiosity again to understand why don't they want mental health help? Is it they don't think they need it? Do they have fears about their career implications? You know, what is it exactly? And is there a way around that? You know, can we go just to the GP instead and start from there? Can we go external, so confidentiality is assured? Can we, you know, go and join a sporting club instead, because then you've got peers around you? You know, what is there something else? You know, if you're not ready to see a psychologist yet, that's okay. There's other soft entry points into mental health. You know, peer recovery work is the next big thing, I think, that's starting to come through. And when UWA did an evaluation of soldiers and sirens, that was the thing. People didn't care about what qualifications we had. They didn't care whether it was free or cost money or whatever. What they cared about was, had we lived this too? And because we lived that uniform service, that's what they wanted. And I think that's what we all want, is for somebody who understands our story and can walk alongside us.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, for us, I think, you know, the pandemic over the last, I mean, if you look at the last 2 years, 99% of our workforce works remotely, right? I mean, yes, there is a lot of screen time in terms of phone calls and meetings and things like that. But I think the role of leadership has actually changed in the last couple of years, where it is a lot more managers who can actually manage people rather than the leadership leading things. So constant conversations, phone calls, and now we've actually kind of put measurements in place where if you're a team lead and you have got whatever 8 or 9 people reporting to you, how many one-on-one phone calls have you had with each of the individuals? How many times have you actually spoken to the people? And it doesn't need to be about work. I mean, it could be just a phone call. Not very different to the Are You Okay campaign. So that is helping to an extent, but it is still very soft. I mean, we still struggle to actually identify people who have mental illness and depression or anxiety. So there's still a way to go with that. And things like what we're trying to do is also to involve the family. Like we run yoga sessions. There is basically cooking sessions where the partner basically comes and runs cookery classes. There's a kids day. So I think making sure that the family is involved also actually tells us whether the participation, based on the participation levels of each of these employees, gives us a little bit of leading indicators on their mindset. So I think these are all kind of soft ways to actually reach out to people to understand what their state of mind is. Yeah.
Thank you. Leading on to the next question, then, what can be done to reduce or prevent psychological injury in police personnel? There's a very long question to be answered, but I'll let either Helen or Danielle or Sean, Daniel, Simon.
I feel like we've kind of almost answered it.
Yeah, so do I. Yeah.
I think it's all of those things. It's having these conversations, having these forums like we are today, giving people lots of different options, sharing stories, and just doing all the things we're already doing and more of.
Yep, exactly. Sean, Simon. No.
No, I haven't got anything else.
Good.
Every time someone talks, I just keep thinking about, wow, if you only knew the benefit that provides and the value that provides to corporates. We changed the word from hope to you're in demand. But when you're
I like hearing that. Thank you.
And you are. I mean, the last kind of 3 months, Sean and I have been educating recruiters. We've been educating employers about the benefits, and that's changed our whole business model because now they understand the benefits. And mental health, well-being is an absolutely accepted talking point within business. As part of our program, we actually have first responders who have moved into companies and they've taken the role as lead mental health first responder. What better person to promote it's okay to talk?
Yeah, I might just add on that. It's a great point because we talk about education within agencies to provide that right environment. But as Simon said, we've been working really hard because we've recognised and we've partnered with a really well-known and interesting human being who's probably globally seen as a recruitment specialist, written lots of books, and he's been working with us. And one of the things that we've sort of realised is there is still that, it's not just a stigma out there for not employing first responders, but it's also the point of if you apply for a job and you don't get that resume spot on, you miss out on that first pile of those who get through. And we're trying to educate organisations and recruiters to look past that, maybe that slight error and not the perfect resume to see a first responder who has this depth of experience and knowledge that will benefit their organisation. So we're trying to help, and with this, with this gentleman's help, move away from that traditional hiring sort of methodology that is just about matching the perfect wording on a resume to a job description, but actually seeing the benefits and the depth of a first responder. So there's a whole range of education pieces out there that, we're sort of working on that back end as well to help people get through and find that next role for them that's going to give them.
We stuck.
It's
Peace of
frozen.
mind and a
There
feeling
we
of
go.
belonging.
Okay. And Simon and John, Soldiers and Sirens is looking for anybody who's served and is now a mental health professional. So if you have contacts in WA, send them over.
I think, so just moving along, the last two questions that are here, and I will have a look at anyone that's actually posted any questions just quickly. I honestly do think we've answered them anyway, but the seventh question is mental health literacy has been thought to be important in reducing stigma and increase awareness. How can mental health literacy be increased within the police force? And, we've stated that before, it's education. It's, in any training forums, how does it come up? It's in embedding it into, policy and procedure with new recruits, with people who are promoting. And, Danielle, if you want to answer on, you're more of the professional than what I am in respect to this.
I think it's been difficult. I don't know what's happening now, but because we were trying to get more and more police recruits out the door, I think the academy programs shrunk. But hopefully, I think that's the place really, is where we've got to get in and we've got to talk to recruit schools. We've got to talk to people on promotion courses. We've got to talk to people on their detective courses. Whenever we've got a group of people in a room together, we should be having that conversation. I think at recruit level, I don't know if people remember. Yeah, I think if we talk about mental health, then people go, oh yeah, but I'm 6 foot tall and bulletproof, I'll be all right. So whether it goes in at that point, I don't know, but it's worth kind of flagging it. Probably if we had some people with lived experience in a job for 25 years that can talk to them and tell the story, that might stick better than us professionals talking about it. But
I've found whenever I've done presentations for a lot of recruits, me being injured so early on, and then doing that, and what could I have done better, what could I have learned, we make it like a very learning process. I've had so much feedback that they learned so much more at that time because I was still junior, which means it's very much aware of like what can happen if it does, what services are provided, what can you do. But just, I think with that, they've taken a little bit more away as well, because you don't have to just be in the job 25 years. You know what I mean? Like, you can be in the job one day and all of a sudden you find yourself in that situation. But I think it's lived experience from all walks of police force, I think, is very important.
Yeah, definitely. And I think as well, is doing that, is telling the stories about this could affect anyone. It's not about being resilient. And I think a lot of times they try to embed these resilience programs, but I think you're already resilient. You wouldn't join the police force if you weren't a resilient person, so it's just saying this could happen to anyone at some point.
I've got a couple of things on that. I guess just reminded me of a story. We know of a case where a former police officer went back and actually got an instructor role at a particular university teaching police, and he was asked by a recruit about, your experience, tell us about some of your issues, and he started to talk about trauma, and understanding is that he was counselled by senior management that was not the way to go, and it's not the time to be talking about sort of stuff. So that was one interesting story. The only other thing I'd like to say about this is I think as long as we have a model that's driven by an insurance model, where we're working through insurers that are driven by financial KPIs, I think there's always going to be an issue, because at the end of the day, what are we really putting that care of an individual who's traumatized in the right hands, or are we just throwing them amongst the wolves out there? With organizations driven by financial, and look, every organization generally is out there, but the question has to be asked in many cases: is is it the actual care of the person we're considering here, or is it just a financial outcome? That's a challenge for the future.
Especially for very vulnerable people.
Correct. Yeah, correct.
Yeah, very well said. The last question is, how can workplace culture be improved for the police force? I'm sure we've touched on this anyway throughout the discussion, but if anyone else has anything else to add to that, please feel free. Daniel, I haven't heard from you for a while over there.
Yeah, I think, again, I'm not Australian, and I'm not an Australian federal police officer, so I don't know how much I can comment, but I think for the psychological safe work environment, you know, I have done a lot of research on that and reading on that. Amy Edmondson, she teaches leadership at Harvard, and that's what she really lectures on. That's her passion, is developing a psychologically safe work environment for not specifically emergency services, but it definitely applies to us. And she considers that an environment where people can come forward and voice their opinion without being punished or without a negative. They feel safe coming forward and speaking their mind. And I find that in many emergency services over here, we can't do that. And I think that makes for a psychologically unhealthy work environment. And, you know, a lot of the pressures for us over here is accountability. And Dr. Edmondson even mentions that, about having an environment where accountability is important or stressed as a paramount value over psychologically safe work environment. The result is anxiety. And I'm like, holy smokes, how many of us are anxious, right? That's what happens if we don't feel safe coming forward and saying, hey, you know what, that call hurt me, or you know, that call affected me, or hey, I think what you're doing isn't right, and this is why. Because of that stigma that is real. Like, that is, stigma is not just a thing, it is a real thing that people will potentially get fired for. So I think instead of focusing so much on the individual who receives that trauma, and we're great at that, you know, I now have diagnosed with PTSD. Okay, Dan, here are all the things that you have to do, Dan. You need to go do this, you need to do that, you need to do this. But if I'm in a toxic work environment, you know, don't fix the boat, not the screaming passengers, right? I think there needs to be more focus on a psychologically healthy work environment. Again, a lot of the studies show that, you know, once we have that trauma, what happens after, if we're not nurtured in a safe environment, then that's just going to make things worse for us. But we have this myopic view of, well, the reason that, you know, you killed yourself, or the reason that you're not going to work, is because of that initial trauma. It's because that dead baby you saw. When the reality is, in many cases, it's because of what happened after that fact.
Anyone else?
I'd just say that workplace culture is such a complex issue. And there are so many competing interests. There are different personalities. There are, in corporate, there are people who will do anything to get their number for the quarter to make them look good. So the way Sean and I approach this is that a psychological safe workplace is a workplace that meets your needs. And Sean runs this wonderful session in our program where he puts it to the participants and says, tell me what your needs are. And we dive really deeply into that, because if you don't want to deal with people, but you're okay working for yourself, is it, do you like travel? You don't like travel. Is it that you like, how do you like to be led? What's your working style? For us, the psychological safe workplace is one that you've really considered, researched, and then you find yourself a good mentor, whether that be both internal and external. So I just wanted to recognise that and make the point. In our view, you know, this issue of workplace culture is so complex that it's nearly out of our control. But to give us back some control, we need to spend some time making sure that whenever we move into a new work environment, it's one that meets our needs. Sean, do you want to add anything to that, given that you run that session?
Yeah, I guess only that you know, we know where all our people have come from. We know their stories. We delve right into their backgrounds, and we know where they're from. But sending them on forward to the next journey is become so important to us in the sense that we know that especially if they're carrying some mental health with them, and many are, that next journey is vital. That if they step into the wrong place, and we've had a couple, it can set them back. And it can also, you talked about setting a new path. It can mean that they've set a new path, they start to walk down it and suddenly realize that this path is horrible. I want to go back to what I had, and if I can't, I've got nothing. So it's really, really important to really reiterate to them that finding that next role is not just about grabbing the first job. It's not just about looking at something that looks exciting, but it's really analysing what that job might mean, and also what's important to you now. If you've been through 10 years, 15 years of trauma, you're on some repair, you're feeling better about yourself, you've really messed your family around through all this. The last thing you want to do is jump into a big job where you're traveling away 3 days a week, 4 days a week, and it starts again. It might be exciting for you, and I can honestly put my hand up, and I fell into that trap myself. It was an exciting opportunity. I was traveling all over the world, and I neglected my family, and I should have learned those lessons. So we're really cognizant about sending people on that next journey with looking for what's best for them in terms of not just a mentally healthy workplace, but a workplace that suits them, their family, their new lifestyle, and they get some benefit from it. And we follow up with them, longitudinally, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, to see how they're going and make sure that is a good fit. And some of them within 12 months might have had 3 jobs, and that's okay, because we want them to find that perfect place that's good for them for the future.
You can't apply a cookie cutter approach to everyone. It's got to be specific and individual. Yeah,
absolutely.
And that's the same as police officers returning, if they're still in the job, and they're putting them in an area, return to work. What worked for me is going to work for someone else, but it's getting to know that individual, doing the time with them, working what their interests are, their strengths are, what they need to improve on. And that's very, very important. Anyone else? Danielle, do you have anything to add?
I think the only comment I would make is, I think Sean and Simon touched, for a private commercial organization like ours, where if you actually have a quarterly meeting, all you talk about is numbers, the growth numbers, where the industry is, where we are, what is our market share, the profitability, etc. So, but I think to really, affect change from the top, as leaders, we have been very conscious to talk about mental health and what people need to actually pay attention to in every forum where we have got, whether it is 10 employees or 100 employees who are listening to us, so that they can actually hear from the leadership that mental health is something that every one of us have to be cognizant of, aware of. And so, keep an eye on all of our peers as well. So slowly change is happening, but I think, corporate culture, it's difficult.
I think the problem is that I've never met a chief or a CEO that said that mental health was not a priority for them. They always say that it is, right? They're always going to say it. Yet when you talk to the men and women that are working around, they sometimes can give you examples where that is not the case, unfortunately, right? So it's putting your money where your mouth is, so to speak. If you say that, then do it. That will go far.
Actions speak louder than words.
I've found it amazing. My last full-time role before I started this work with Simon was for a large sort of semi-government organisation, and it never ceased to amaze me every year when the results would come out for the employee engagement surveys that they did. People would look and leaders would get up and they'd travel the country spouting how great these results were, and most people in the audience would just look at each other and shake their head and think, wow, who are these people that are saying these amazing things, because they're not true. So it was an incredible exercise that, where you can play with data and make things look fantastic, but there was rarely too much that was presented that was poor, where there was an action taken for the organisation to say, hey, we need to really work on this mental health issue because we're not real good at it. It was, that would have been way down the bottom or not spoken about at all. So that just, it's great to hear that there's organisations out there now who actually have this on their agenda, or maybe even as a KPI when they have meeting. That's pretty encouraging. If that's that needs to be the future, obviously.
Truth and action.
Yeah, and I think in some ways I can actually, to hear a leader say that how important mental health is to the organization. And again, coming back to that officer or that emergency worker who is battling with their trauma, to hear their leader do that and know, and not really showing or not really seeing that there's no validation, support, or understanding from that leader, then that can almost, in some ways, I think, be worse, right? Where they're saying one thing and they're not doing it. Versus, again, I've met many CEOs where that is true, where they do put their money where their mouth is. They are out there when I talk to the people working the front lines, that they say, yeah, this person, our leader, is really, really great. They're there with us. They do ride-alongs with us. They're not just trapped in their office. And I know it's a super difficult position to be in for any size organization, but to say that you support mental health and it doesn't get to the ground level frontline people, it's almost worse to say that you do if you don't.
Yeah, it's pointless as well. If anyone has anything else to add, I'll start wrapping this up. If no one else has anything.
Just on workplaces, I just wish that, we sometimes will accommodate people with disabilities and different things, and that's fine. We're like, okay, yep, you've got your vision impairment, you've got this, let's adapt our workplace for you. I wish workplaces would do the same with mental health,
Yeah.
If you've got PTSD and you don't want to have your back to an open door, or you can't manage a lot of noise, then that's okay. You can still do the work. You can do a perfectly amazing job. We just need to make these little accommodations for you. I think that would be amazing into the future.
Absolutely.
Just one last thing for me, because I know Dan's struggling with this at the moment. I've picked it up. Mate, you've done enough work over here now, and you're respected enough that I think we can officially adopt you as a part Aussie. So we look forward to your next
That's
trip.
great, Sean. That's I'm honored to be a part Aussie. That's wonderful. That's great. And I try, and I know you don't see these things that you're doing as being great, but when I was over there, I saw some really simple things, like in Melbourne and Victoria, like the paramedics on their patient care report, there's like a little ticky box, every call they go on, do you want to speak to a mental health professional? Super easy. But I couldn't get that to happen over here to save my life, right? So small things like that are normal there, that are normalized there, like, yeah, it's no big deal. It's a simple thing. It's like going uphill to get that kind of stuff happening over here. So yeah, I'm happy to be I'll see if I can work on my accent.
And maybe have a few schooners, but anyway, we'll move on.
No problem there.
Listen, I just wanted to say personally, thank you to all the wonderful panelists for this insightful discussion. I'm definitely going to take something home from it, and I hope everyone listening can take something home as well, and back to their organisations or who they work for. So I'd just like to say, on behalf of Mental Health Foundation Australia, I'd like to thank all of our speakers and panelists for participating in today's event. I'd also like to thank all of our sponsors and our guests for your support and participation in this. Thank you, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of the day, and hopefully things start to normalise with COVID-19 and we can start making some serious change. Thank you.